Sometimes attempts to protect something valuable can lead to the exact opposite outcome. The main character of our story almost achieved what she dreamed of, but unfortunately, she nearly paid too high a price for it. Ignacio Seogaraus, the 36-year-old protagonist, served as a police officer in the cozy town of Greeley, Colorado, USA. He took immense pride in his profession and earned respect in the police department. However, beyond his career ambitions, Ignacio claimed that his utmost goal was to protect the younger generation. That's why he often visited schools as a community worker, eagerly sharing advice with children and teenagers on how to stay safe on city streets. Shona Elson had been working as a dispatcher in the same department for about 13 years. She had a reputation as a level-headed and competent employee. Ignacio and Shona met while playing on the same softball team. Right there on the field, they struck up a conversation that even turned into flirting. The symbolically co-scored goal hinted that they should get to know each other better. However, there was one issue. Shona had long been married to Ken Elson, who also worked in the police department, and had 3 children. Nevertheless, the woman sincerely believed that her relationship with her husband had long exhausted itself, and she no longer felt any attraction to him. Meeting Ignacio coincided with the period when Shona's married life was on the verge of collapse. Yielding to her feelings, she quickly entered into a romantic relationship with her new acquaintance. It resembled love at first sight. However, Ignacio's family life was not cloudless either. He was also married. He had met his future wife, Heather, during his senior year of college. Both were friendly, outgoing, cheerful, and got along wonderfully. The partners were enchanted with each other from the first moment they met, which grew into a passionate marriage. During her college years, meeting Ignacio was a defining event for Heather. The story's hero seemed like the perfect match. The girl was very cautious, as she had experienced abuse in her previous relationship with a boyfriend. Even Ignacio had to confront this guy early in their romance because he started stalking Heather. Fortunately, Ignacio's intervention helped quickly resolve the conflict. Against the backdrop of the traumatic experience of past relationships, Ignacio seemed like a real prince to Heather. Just a few months after they started dating, he proposed to the girl. Of course, being captivated by youthful feelings, the heroine agreed. But she set one condition. Heather insisted on fidelity and warned that in case of infidelity, they would immediately divorce forever. After obtaining their education, the newlyweds immersed themselves in their careers. Even while studying, Heather worked at a bank. Now she could devote more time to work and even aspired to a leadership position. The girl began to climb the career ladder rapidly. As a result, in just a few years, the young and attractive Heather became the head of the city's credit union. Meanwhile, Ignacio served as a police officer and worked a lot in the city department. He managed to successfully combine zeal at work and love for his wife. The couple lacked only one thing, a child to seal their union. Unfortunately, for a long time, they could not conceive a baby. Only 5 years after the wedding, a girl finally came into the world, whom they named Victoria. Now it seemed that the heroes' lives fully corresponded to the American dream. But fate had many trials in store for the couple. The first one befell Heather in 1997 when her father suddenly died of a heart attack. The whole family struggled with this loss, but it was only the beginning. Just a week after the tragedy, Heather's mother was diagnosed with a terrible disease, cancer. Although the illness was detected at an early stage, the treatment methods of that time did not allow fighting it effectively. Despite all the efforts of doctors and various therapy techniques, the ailment progressed. In 2003, the heroine's mother passed away, never overcoming the disease. After these events, Heather seemed completely devastated. She had always been very close to her parents and did not expect that capricious fate would take them so early. The woman withdrew into herself and fell into depression. Heather's trauma was so deep that for some time she could not perform the lion's share of household chores, which she had previously managed successfully. Her husband tried to show understanding, began to spend more time with Victoria, and made efforts to help around the house and support his wife. Unfortunately, after several months, he failed to make any progress. Ignacio was overloaded with work at the police department and labored at home in all his free time. Of course, this began to cause discontent. The couple turned to a psychotherapist, asking them to prescribe some medications so that Heather could overcome depression, distract herself, and start returning to normal life. Eventually, therapy began to yield results, her mood finally improved, and she began to engage in her usual activities. However, the previous months had a detrimental effect on the couple. Ignacio endured for a long time, but he was too exhausted, so he began to seek solace in someone else. Now he increasingly stayed late at work. It seemed as if the once loving husband and father was even trying to plan his schedule in such a way as to not cross paths with his family at all. It was during this period that Ignacio met Shona Elson. After the fateful softball match, a secret affair flared up between them. From the very beginning, it was sheer madness. Shona was a remarkably passionate woman but had poor control over her emotions. At times, this manifested in aggression, and during arguments, she did not care who was around. It seemed that the lovers were not very concerned about secrecy. Almost the entire police department knew about their affair. The main stumbling block had always been Ignacio's married life. He did not want to divorce his wife, while Shona insisted that they should be together. The mistress herself assured that she was ready to leave her husband for Ignacio at any moment. After 6 months of this sinful relationship, the situation only worsened. Out of the blue, Shona informed Ignacio that she was pregnant with his child. The man maintained that the baby was not his and assumed that the father was Shona's husband, Ken. However, the mistress insisted that this was impossible since her husband had a vasectomy after the birth of their 3 children and became infertile. Moreover, there could be no mistake because, according to her, Ignacio was her only partner during the period of the alleged conception. Such a turn of events was not part of Ignacio's plans. The story's hero began to persuade Shona to have an abortion. As before, he clearly did not intend to leave his wife and go to Shona. She wanted to manipulate the pregnancy but found herself trapped. As soon as Shona's delicate condition became apparent, her infertile husband would want a divorce. So, in the end, she had to terminate the pregnancy, which she later regretted for a long time. But this story taught Shona nothing. In mid-2005, the woman became pregnant by Ignacio again and this time flatly refused to have an abortion. This new pregnancy was a very alarming signal for the man. Now he saw the true face of his mistress, who sought to control the situation and himself in every possible way. It seemed that she was trying to keep him by her side with the help of this child. From that moment, Ignacio tried to distance himself from Shona for the first time. For her part, the woman decided that it was time to reveal the truth about her husband's infidelity to Heather and set to work. She thought that the wife, upon learning about this, would leave Ignacio herself, and then they could be together. The first meeting of the women turned into a real nightmare for Heather. Shona ambushed her in a grocery store and began to pursue her between the aisles, talking about the wonderful intimate connection with Ignacio and how much Heather's husband loved his mistress. The stalker's inadequate behavior played a cruel joke on her. Despite the confessions of infidelity, Heather simply did not believe her, considering the woman insane. The unfaithful husband also played along, disavowing in every possible way his acquaintance and connection with this unhinged woman. But Shona did not stop there. She began to harass Heather with phone calls, found her contacts in all messengers and social networks. Blocking the number did not help. Ignacio continued to deny any connection with her and successfully took advantage of Shona's inadequate behavior. However, Heather's suspicions only grew stronger. The mistress turned out to be a real stalker. She arranged sudden meetings with Heather in any corner of the city. The victim was worried and often complained to her family and husband about the crazy woman. But for obvious reasons, Ignacio could not help in any way. Talking to Shona no longer worked, but even a simple statement against her could completely cross out a decade and a half of career growth. Heather was consumed by sadness and fear. Her husband promised to deal with the problem, but things did not go beyond talking to his mistress. As always, it did not work. Shona behaved more and more impudently and defiantly. Shona's behavior not only seemed strange but also led to more disturbing thoughts. There was no way to corner the husband. He knew how to behave so as not to blurt out anything during a conversation, but his wife was persistent and continued to insist. In the spring of the same year, the couple went for a walk. Heather made every effort to elicit the truth from her husband. Eventually, he confessed that he had been having an affair with Shona Elson, the very stalker, for quite a long time. However, he assured that they had broken up and were no longer in a relationship. But that was a lie. Ignacio, despite being stalked by Shona, continued his extramarital love affair with her, further inflaming his mistress's feelings. Although the man considered her behavior inadequate, he was not going to give up this intrigue. Ignacio was at a loss and did not know how to act in this situation. For Heather, the confession that this story had been going on for so long came as a shock. Later, Ignacio even admitted that Shona had become pregnant by him for the second time and this time refused to have an abortion. The story's hero tried to somehow justify the stalker's behavior by the circumstances in which she found herself. It was painful for Heather to hear this, but she strove to the last to act wisely and not make hasty decisions in a state of passion. Despite the promise made before the altar, Heather did not want to divorce her husband, with whom she had lived for about 10 years and was raising a daughter. Ignacio himself understood that the situation with Shona had gotten out of control. He apologized and promised never to cheat on his wife again. The man wanted to save the marriage, and they decided not to think about what to do with the illegitimate child for now. In any case, Heather could not allow her husband to continue communicating with Shona. In her opinion, Ignacio had to resolve this problem as soon as possible and give up the child. The story's heroine did not want to destroy the family and leave the children without a father. Of course, she felt betrayed and was terribly disappointed in her husband, whom she trusted. After this conversation, the woman called all her relatives and expressed her indignation in detail in order to calm down somehow. Her loved ones supported her decision. Heather intended to restore the relationship with her husband, but first, it was necessary to get rid of the rival. She stated that first of all, Ignacio should give up his parental rights to the child Shona had given birth to. Then the couple planned to seek advice from a psychologist to try to save the family. Of course, Ignacio had to stop any contact with Shona, even at work. That same evening, the husband called his mistress on speakerphone in the presence of his wife and broke up with her. Shona took it seriously and began bombarding Heather with text messages and calls. She was clearly out of her mind, sending creepy messages, including threats and photos related to violence. The woman accused Heather of preventing her from building happiness with Ignacio. Shona completely ignored the fact that she had intruded and tried to destroy someone else's family. And Ignacio simply did not want to be with her. The stalker was beside herself with rage, and it all ended in a bloody drama. On the evening of January 23, 2007, a witness who had witnessed a conflict between two individuals turned to the police department. It was known for certain that one of them was a woman. She had just left work and lingered a bit with colleagues in the parking lot, and then everyone went to their cars. Before they could leave the parking lot, one of the witnesses saw a figure in black clothes and a death mask appear out of nowhere. The attacker headed straight for Heather, raising a hand in which a gun gleamed. The shooter ordered the victim to get on her knees. He shouted, "You ruined my life," and then fired 2 shots at her and fled. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, Heather was still breathing. But she was unconscious. She had received a gunshot wound to the head and chest. The victim's condition was critical, so she was immediately taken to the intensive care unit. Unfortunately, the woman died in the hospital. The police immediately recognized the deceased as the wife of one of their department employees. Detectives immediately took up the investigation. First of all, they talked to the witness who had called the department. Heather's colleague reported that the attacker was dressed in black, so it was impossible to see the face. He was not even sure about the gender of the perpetrator. From a distance, judging by the physique, it was difficult to determine whether it was a woman or just a short man. Immediately after the shots, the killer jumped into a pickup truck and fled. Witnesses did not see the license plate. Ignacio was called right away. That day, he was spending time with his daughter Victoria and was waiting for his wife to return from work. The man was stunned because he did not expect such an outcome under any circumstances. He provided the investigation with the first valuable leads for the search. Despite his mistress's inadequate behavior, Ignacio simply refused to believe that it was she who had shot Heather. All the police officers took what happened very much to heart. Detectives ran Shona and Ken's vehicles through the databases. Judging by the description, Ken's car was similar to the one in which the criminal had fled. So law enforcement officers were immediately dispatched to their house. Ken met the detectives and reported that on the day of the murder, it was their shared car with his wife, but Shona had made several trips in it. It was decided to track the pickup truck's route using footage from surveillance cameras. It turned out that it was moving directly from the crime scene to a wine store on the outskirts of the city. There, the driver, still dressed in black, got out of the car. The face was not visible, but the police noticed one detail. Despite the snowfall and frost, this person was barefoot. After examining the roadside between the 2 points of the route, law enforcement officers found discarded clothes and shoes, obviously men's. The items were immediately checked for traces of gunpowder, and these suspicions were confirmed. At the crime scene, tread marks from the wheels of the killer's vehicle were found. They matched the tires of Ken Nelson's car. The Glock pistol used to shoot Heather was compared with the weapons registered to Ken and Shona. However, it turned out that Ken was at work at the time of the murder and had a reliable alibi. So all suspicions about the woman only intensified. The owner of the wine store said that a barefoot woman had indeed come to him that evening. He recognized her as Shona. Soon the police representatives met with her. The woman explained that she had a terrible headache all day, so she decided to buy wine. According to her, when she reached the store, Shona remembered that she had not taken her purse with her. So she had to return empty-handed. And to somehow justify her strange clothes, she said that she had grabbed the first thing that came to hand in the laundry basket. The woman did not care how it would look from the outside, the headache was tormenting her too much. Shona just wanted to buy wine to ease her suffering. But, according to her, as soon as she drove up to the store, she decided to go back because she had no money with her. And as soon as the woman went out to the driveway, Ken ran up to her and ordered her to get out of the pickup truck because it all looked very suspicious. When she did so, the headache reached its peak. Therefore, the story's heroine simply lost consciousness and remembered nothing until the next morning. This whole story sounded extremely unconvincing, so no one believed Shona's version. During the investigation, it was discovered that her best friend, Michelle Moore, who worked as an assistant sheriff, actively assisted her. It remained a mystery what exactly Heather had done to offend Michelle. Judging by the confessions, the latter became an accomplice purely out of a sense of solidarity with her friend. Michelle provided Shona with active support, in particular, helped plan the massacre itself, and also explained how best to cover their tracks. It was like a kind of consultation. The women used their professional knowledge and skills acquired while serving in the police and approached both the planning and the commission of the crime itself very carefully. Both suspects were arrested and charged with Heather's murder. However, Michelle Moore got off with a relatively light punishment, 9 years in prison for complicity in the murder. Of course, she could have received a much harsher sentence, but thanks to a plea deal with the investigation and admission of guilt, the term was significantly reduced. During the trial, Michelle testified against Shona. Given that Michelle Moore held the position of deputy sheriff, such antics by police officers seemed absolutely inappropriate and unacceptable. Over the long years of communication, a warm friendship had developed between the women, but even for the closest of friends, Michelle's behavior seemed extremely wild and incomprehensible. She was well aware of the situation in Heather's family and the complex relationship between Shona and Ignacio. Throughout the several years of this affair, the couple in love experienced many ups and downs. At times, it was extremely difficult for the future killer to control herself. Often during such periods, it was Michelle who became her only support and comfort. When her lover called Shona and publicly, on speakerphone, admitted that their relationship was over, it was the last straw for the woman. At first, Shona simply refused to believe it, thinking that Ignacio had decided to play to the public in this way. But already during their first face-to-face meeting, she realized that the man was quite serious. It became obvious that he intended to preserve his marriage and no longer showed any interest in his mistress. This completely knocked Shona off course. Once again, the woman came to Michelle to pour out her heart and find the usual support from her friend. By that time, Shona had already managed to turn the assistant sheriff against Heather. As it turned out, she constantly resorted to a variety of tricks and manipulations to get what she wanted. Even Michelle's best friend found herself in the clutches of a skilled manipulator. For a long time, the deputy sheriff hesitated and did not know how to act in this situation. But in the end, she still decided to help the criminal. Michelle not only personally told Shona about the specifics of detectives' work and methods of conducting investigations but also arranged several meetings with other employees for her friend. However, they had no idea why the woman was interested in such things. Colleagues explained Shona's heightened interest in criminology by an ordinary desire to learn more about all aspects of her profession. It was these meetings and consultations that became decisive during the planning of this brutal crime. When the investigation finally managed to uncover all the facts, it immediately became clear why no incriminating searches were found during the inspection of Shona's mobile phone and computer. The reason was that the woman simply did not make them. Thanks to Michelle, she had direct access to almost the entire knowledge base in the field of criminology, as well as to the best specialists in this field. It was from Michelle Moore that the killer learned how to behave in order not to fall into the field of view of law enforcement officers. In particular, the assistant sheriff explained to her friend how to use the internet correctly so as not to get burned later. Shona immediately abandoned the idea of making any suspicious or ambiguous requests on the web from her personal gadgets or office computers. When the main suspect was taken into custody, during interrogations she constantly feigned surprise and seemed to be genuinely amazed at the accusations of murder. Shona repeated over and over again that she remembered absolutely nothing about the shooting. Nevertheless, there was more than enough evidence against her. So, until the start of the court hearings, the woman was behind bars. Due to the considerable public outcry and the likelihood of bias on the part of the jury, who could have known all the details of the case even before the trial, it was decided to transfer the trial of Shona Elson to a neighboring district. In February 2008, the prosecutors and the defense attorney delivered their opening statements to the jury. The prosecution argued that Shona had several affairs with married police officers. But the woman became most fixated on Ignacio. She fell in love with him so much that she even became pregnant. One step away from divorce, according to the prosecutors, Shona decided to get rid of her lover's wife, who was the main obstacle to their happiness. The prosecutors found many witnesses whose statements eloquently characterized the accused. For example, one of the police officers said that Shona hated Heather so fiercely that during shooting practice she repeatedly confessed that she mentally saw the face of her rival instead of the target. The defendant desperately denied all accusations and tried to shift the blame to someone else. However, the prosecutors were able to develop a clear and logical understanding of the entire chronology of events, supported by numerous testimonies and evidence. According to the prosecution's version, Shona had planned this brutal crime long ago. At the same time, she deliberately tried to frame her husband Ken. That is why the woman used his car, as well as his clothes, previously thrown into the laundry basket. These items had traces of the husband on them. This should have made it possible to hide the identity of the real killer. In addition, a considerable amount of Ken's own DNA was found on the discarded clothing items. All this seriously confused the investigation in the initial stages. The prosecutors believed that Shona wanted to get rid of two main obstacles to a happy future with Ignacio in one fell swoop. It was about his lawful wife, as well as about her own husband, who, in the event of a divorce, could claim part of the jointly acquired property. After short deliberations, the jury concluded that Shona Elson was guilty of premeditated murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Custody of the orphan Victoria, the daughter of the deceased Heather, was entrusted to her biological father Ignacio, who subsequently raised the girl. This eerie story features police officer Ignacio Seogaraus, his wife Heather, and his mistress dispatcher Shona Elson. The couple's relationship was tested after the death of Heather's parents. The woman fell into depression, and Ignacio sought solace on the side. The affair with Shona lasted 2 years, and even the birth of an illegitimate child did not force the man to leave his wife. When he finally broke up with his mistress, she began to stalk Heather, threatening violence. With the help of her policewoman friend, Michelle Moore, Shona carefully planned the murder. The women used their professional knowledge to leave no trace. Dressed in men's clothing, in a mask and with a gun, Shona ambushed Heather in the parking lot, shooting her in front of colleagues. The disguise did not help. The police exposed the killer, who faced life imprisonment. Michelle Moore got 9 years as an accomplice. Ignacio's biological father took custody of Heather's daughter. This story shows how jealousy, cruelty, and manipulation can ruin lives. Instead of solving problems openly and in a civilized manner, some resort to insidious and bloody methods. But sooner or later, everyone will have to answer to the law. And no evil will go unpunished. That's all for now. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future content. Take care and goodbye.